us. Wave at us. Yeah, that's great. Big wave. Thank you.
School of the Arts is one of the great art institutions in New York City. When I think back to the beginning of the School of the Arts 60 years ago here in this building, Dodge Hall, it is incredible to think about the journey from that first small group of a couple of artists all the way up to now, 60 years later, where we have 4 thriving areas of study. We have some of the most eminent artists in the world who are permanent faculty here. Our graduates have won every imaginable prize, whether it's the Pulitzer Prize or the National Book Award or Guggenheim's Emmy Awards and Academy Awards and even Nobel Prizes. But what really matters, I think, is that it started here. One of the things that is characteristic of the School of the Arts is the incredible diversity of the work that our students do and our alumni go on to do. So the same school can produce blockbuster animation films alongside documentaries that reveal some of the greatest problems in the world today. As the world becomes ever more complex, we need artists more than ever. Our artists are fearless, they are brilliant, and they're serious. They're serious because they really believe, as do we all, that this work matters. Hello and welcome, everybody. It is great to see you here. Congratulations to the 2026 graduating class of the School of the Arts. Congratulations on your extraordinary work over these years at Columbia and on your truly remarkable focus and dedication to your art and scholarship during these very challenging times. Congratulations on having attained the status of Masters of Fine Arts, well deserved for your accomplishments as filmmakers, theater makers, visual and sound artists, and writers, or having attained the status of master's degree holder in film and media studies for your scholarly achievements. We could not be prouder of you or more excited to see what you will do next. Graduation is a big milestone. But of course, life happens in many different segments of time, sometimes quite stagnant, honestly, sometimes lively, sometimes it feels blurry, sometimes clear. You're going to do wonderful things in your own way and in your own time. All of us here know that you will take your immense creativity and artistic integrity into magnificent directions, changing the world along the way. We also know that there's no one path or no expected timeline. Your next steps may feel very shaky. We are still here for you as you take them. We will always be here for you. And you will now be joining a most stellar and decorated group of people, the alumni of the Columbia University School of the Arts, a truly awesome mix of artists and scholars who will welcome you into their starry company. But we will miss you here. Unquestionably, these last few years have been hard ones at Columbia and around the country and around the world. And yet, for all the stresses and the strains and at times contention and pain, I do believe that I can turn this page, that we have been in this together. It is an incredible community, varied in every way, united by your devotion to making and studying art. Over these years, you have become deeply valued members of the School of the Arts community. As students, artists, and scholars first and foremost, but also as contributors to each aspect of our operation, whether that's in production, spearheading newsletters and other publications, collaborating with each other on various projects, teaching and mentoring our undergraduates, or volunteering in the community, and always helping us to think better through your advocacy and your empathy. This class is just excellent. So full of talent and spirit and devotion to your craft. You come from 22 different countries and from 24 US states, and your backgrounds are as diverse and inspiring as your art is original and motivated. And let me say this, This diversity and this international character is something that we cherish and we always will. We will never give it up, and we will never give it into forces of xenophobia or exclusion. To your families and loved ones who have supported you in this very risky and frankly questionable endeavor of going to art school, I want to give a big shout out. Friends and family. Hold on, wait, you get more. Friends and family, if you are able, please stand up so that we can thank you properly. Thank you for supporting these incredible young artists. To our faculty and staff at the School of the Arts, thank you, thank you, thank you. We love you. You are what makes all of this happen. Our faculty at the School of the Arts represents an unbelievably distinguished and productive group of artists and scholars, active practitioners, true leaders in their disciplines who have brought amazing vigor and inexhaustible inspiration to their fields and to the broader world. They are also, bar none, the most devoted teachers and mentors you will find anywhere. Our staff here at the School of the Arts is also off the charts. These professionals never cease to impress me with their ingenuity, commitment, collaborative ethos, and good humor, which is needed at Columbia. Faculty and staff who are here, including on the stage, if you are able, please stand so that we can thank you properly as well. All right, I want to name a few individuals for special notice. First, our 4 program chairs, Professors Jack Leshner. See if you can spot them here. Brian Kulik, Mia Masaoka, and Deborah Paredes. And our 4 program directors, Hana Seifu, I've learned to leave a long pause after saying Hana Seifu's name. John Haas, Laura Mosquera, and Frank Winslow. They will soon be addressing the audience, inviting all of our students to the stage. I also want to recognize Professor Rob King, Chair of Film and Media Studies, who's not up here on the stage, but is also a program chair. Thank you, Rob. Please give some love to Jana Wright, Dean of Academic Affairs and Planning at the School of the Arts, who's probably not known to many of you, but her behind-the-scenes work and her devotion to the school has been absolutely boundless over the last nearly 20 years. Let's give a big thanks, too, to Julie Dobrow, Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, who first admitted you all a few years ago. Well done. Good job, Julie. And to her fantastic team. There are so many other, that was sweet. There are so many other leaders to thank, including Wendy Mazo, Associate Dean for Development, who spends her days and nights working to help ensure the financial future of the school. Christina Tate, who is our communications guru, and please stay in touch with Christina and her whole team and all of us with your news. And our leaders in programming at Miller Theater, the Lenfest Center for the Arts, and all over campus, Melissa Smay, Lauren Weigel, and Gavin Browning. Thank you all. Let's take a moment to offer profuse thanks to the organizers and contributors to today's wonderful ceremony. Most notably, Layla Maher, Dean of Students and Alumni Affairs, who's here somewhere, who is the most thoughtful, caring, and brilliant ally for our students through their years at Columbia, from orientation to this beautiful event. Herbert Hugh has really stepped up this year to help with this wonderful event, and his work in student affairs at all times is over and above the call of duty. And James Jennings, Assistant Director of Student Affairs, brand new to the school, has been working with Layla and Herbert to manage the ceremony. Thanks to you all. Other helpers tonight, I'm going to read a few names. Other helpers include staff members Sarah Adriance, Julia Bergdorf, Andrew Castillo, Krista Gay, Calvin Kim, Britta Kuhn, Kayla Mayuri, John McShane, Kanika Vaish, Ben Vertil, and Kenny Wong. And our two student workers, Grace Pasilico and Marilee Morales. Bernardo Garcia Valencia designed our beautiful programs, as he designs so much at the school. Things have to look good if you're a School of the Arts, so Bernardo, thank you. I also wish to thank the staff here in Lerner Hall, Columbia's Public Safety, and our delegates for the event who are helping us now and for the reception that follows to keep it all flowing. In the central administration, Carrie Walker is the overall magician behind all of the commencements, and we had fantastic help too from Emerald Curry, Emily Altz, and Steve Francis. And finally, thank you to the great multidisciplinary artist, Shirin Neshat, who will be our convocation speaker in just a few minutes. So over the last few weeks, as I've been walking around thinking about what I wanted to say to you, our amazing class of 2026, I kept finding myself thinking about my father. My father just died about 2 months ago. He was 95. He lived a rich and fulfilling life, not without loss and disappointment, of course, complex and contradictory, deeply inflected by the power of art. He was born in 1931, which is a really long time ago for you history buffs. That's in the middle of the Great Depression and before World War II. Growing up in the Midwest, like so many other immigrants or the children of immigrants, he was very poor. And even as his parents edged closer toward the middle class, they lived very frugal lives. Both he and his brother, whose 100th birthday is today, actually, Florida. Florida is where you celebrate your 100th birthday, so I couldn't be there. They both won scholarships to go to college. And it was in college as a freshman, and now we get to the point here, you're probably wondering, why am I hearing this irrelevant biography of Sarah's dad? But there is a reason. It was in college as a freshman that my father took a course in poetry. Not writing poetry, but reading and studying it. I don't know what motivated him to take this course, but I can say with conviction that it changed his life. Much more than that, it made him who he became in significant ways, and subsequently who I am and perhaps my children. And because he went on to become a law professor, that poetry class, in a sense, went on to touch the lives of thousands of future lawyers. If this seems overstated, it isn't. Somehow this young person sitting in 1949, I think it must have been, in what was probably a toasty New England classroom, reading and listening to the sounds of poetry, had something stir inside him. Something was unleashed in his mind or in his soul. Poetry and other arts as well, everything to do with language, and also with visual arts, which he loved so much. He would spend literally an hour in front of a single painting at a museum. You can imagine how this drove me and my siblings completely insane. Visual arts, music, and other performing arts, these things gave his life complexity and truth. They gave him a language and a way to see the world, to love and to ponder and to protest. I'm not exaggerating when I say that on his literal deathbed, just about 2 months ago, he was still talking about his favorite poems, which he had memorized 75 years earlier, and still speaking to me in that kind of blurred and almost inaccessible voice some people have at the end of their lives about creation. I don't think this is a story about my father. I think it's a story about art. So let me just try to extract for you 3 brief thoughts from all of this recent experience. The first point is that the art you make will belong to others. I mean, really belong. It may be obvious, but then I think it's also kind of miraculous that something that you write or produce or make in so many different ways can find its way into the consciousness of another person so fully that their way of experiencing the world, of experiencing joy or confusion, interest, power, loss, politics, so much else, will be reformed by that. I do believe that the poems my father always recited actually gave the world its cast. And the thing is, you will never know this. For all the incredible awards, all the reviews, and the fan mail you're all going to receive, how many more readers and viewers and listeners are there whose very beings will be rearranged by the work that you do? So what I want to say then is that the work that you do, most of the time invisibly to you, is going to make a profound impact, and for the better, on the minds and lives and well-being of people like my father all around the world. The second point is another chestnut, that art does not get old. Here is Virginia Woolf, speaking of someone who never gets old, herself writing just about exactly 100 years ago on this point, quote, "You should never have a graduation speech without Virginia Woolf in it. It's just a thing to do. It is doubtful," this is Woolf, "it is doubtful whether in the course of centuries, though we have learned much about making machines, we have learned anything about making literature. We do not come to write better. All that we can be said to do is to keep moving, now a little in that direction, now a little in this." I actually think she thought she did write better, but we'll leave that. Those poems my dad carried around with him in his head might have been written in the 1850s, or for that matter in the 1650s, but they were stirring him up and putting him in dialogue with the world nearly 2 centuries or 3 centuries or 4 centuries later. Sure, there are aspects of some works that can become dated, but the point is you are tapping into truths and experiences that are forever being reimagined, re-experienced, restaged. There are very few objects or items of human creation for which we can say this. An old telephone is cool for retro purposes, or for historians, ditto an old aqueduct. But an old sculpture or play or film blows us away anew and afresh every time because its truth still holds. This was what my dad experienced, a kind of shot of vitalization in the arm when he returned to these works of art. So your art belongs to others, and is outside of time's deteriorating properties. And finally, the third thing I want to say about all of this is that your work, what you are doing as artists, is itself changed every day by those who encounter it. As the poet W.H. Auden wrote on the occasion of the death of one of his favorite poets, William Butler Yeats, also one of mine, and of my father's for that matter, in a line my father loved to quote, "The words of a dead man are modified in the guts of the living." How true that is. Those who will take your work into their own lives will make it theirs, the guts of the living. I mean, this digestion thing is kind of maybe not that great, but I did want to just say, if you think about it, when something is ingested, maybe you don't want to be thinking about digestion or ingestion at this moment, but let's just stay with me for 1 second. It gets broken down, and that's how it can become sustenance. One can appreciate art in so many ways, but when it is really absorbed, then it will take on new forms that are marked by the character, the background, the sensibility, and above all, the urgent needs of this new person. I will say that not a day has gone by in the last few years when I've not thought about George Orwell's great novel, 1984. Maybe this is a bad example. Maybe I don't want to be always having to think about 1984. But I do, and I need it, and it is there. Its insights and truths are helping me to understand the world I'm in now. It has become part of my own psychological, intellectual, and political makeup, and it is, in that sense, not exactly Orwell's book anymore, but my own survival manual. It is changed in the guts of the living because at this terrifying time, I need it to live. Dear graduates, we do need your work. We need your vision. We need your words. We need your eyes. We need your intuition. We need your humor. We need the way you hear and listen, and above all, the way you give all of this back in your own voices and in your own terms. And then we, the hundreds, thousands, or even millions of readers, listeners, audience members, and viewers whom you will never know, we will take it from there. Here's Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in a passage my father loved to recite, where works of art are like footprints, quote, "Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again." For me, as your dean, and I think for all of us here, these reflections about how works of art become the heartening sustenance for many people out there in the world, your forlorn and shipwrecked brothers and sisters, take us back to you and what you've been doing these last few years. Your work and dedication offer sources of continual amazement and joy. This week, for instance, has featured CUF, the Columbia University Film Festival. And what a pleasure and source of awe this has been. These films are fantastic. They come to us in language after language, and they are moving and gorgeous and spellbinding. Or still on display until the end of this week at the Lenfest Center of the Arts, so you still have time to get up there if you haven't yet. You can be taken aback by the beauty, creativity, and sheer power of the graduating visual and sound arts students' thesis exhibitions. Our theater students have been putting on show after show for weeks, every one of them of professional quality, full of wit, bursting with energy and intelligence. For our students pursuing a master's degree, they are digging deeply into the history of film and media and also charting its future, presenting at conferences and finding new ways to theorize the visual world in many contexts. Our writing students are doing work that is searching and ambitious, also funny and whimsical, and always original. You will all want to read this work, and I feel very certain that you will. The quiet students of the future, like my father, will have their minds broken open by the work you are all doing now. So to you, the dazzling class of 2026, I extend my warmest possible wishes. We at the school could not aspire for a brighter future for you, full of rich thinking and persistent creativity, and through it all, joy in your scholarship and in your art. Things will get difficult. That is unquestionably the case. And I hope you will be forgiving of yourself. Success in its perfectly packaged form is overrated if it exists at all. But the pleasure and power of the creative life, the day-to-day willingness to keep doing it, the knowledge that what you do makes a difference in ways you will never really know yourself, this is something to cherish. Please stay in very close touch with us. We will miss you so much. And now it is my very distinct pleasure to invite to the podium my colleague, a great composer and sound artist, and the chair of the Visual Arts Program, Mia Masaoka, who will introduce our Convocation speaker. Thank you.
Okay. Born in Qazvin, Iran, and living in Brooklyn, Shirin Neshat works across numerous mediums, including visual arts and filmmaking. She has been in exile from Iran, an experience that has deeply shaped her perspectives. Neshat has been the recipient of the prestigious Golden Lion Award in 1999 and the Silver Lion as the Best Director at the 66th Venice Film Festival in 2009, the Hiroshima Freedom Prize 2005, among many others too numerous to mention. Additionally, she has directed operas in the music world and Verdi's Aida, and was at the Salzburg Festival and was recently restaged at the Paris Opera House in 2025. Her work is now, as we speak, at the Venice Biennale in May with Do You Dare? And I'm eager to see this work in person as I go to Rome and I go to Venice next week to see her work. And it is a film that explores one artist's gaze upon another and the connections that emerge between them. Shot in 3 different socioeconomic landscapes in New York, these films investigate the paradox between women's inner and outer worlds, reality and illusion, American society, and the Iranian female perspective. In 2025, her exhibition was at the Padiglione d'Arte Contemporanea, a show which probes the central themes of the female body and how it represents political ideology, religious problematics, sin, shame, and how art itself can remain as evidence of history, and this evidence can in turn offer a narrative of history itself. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an extraordinary honor to have Shirin here with us delivering the commencement. So please join me in a hearty welcome, robust and noisy welcome for Shirin Neshat.
Wow. It really feels good to be tall. Good evening. It's really true privilege and honor to be addressing you on this extremely important day of your life. And I must confess, at the same time as I was preparing my notes, I kept asking myself, how do I dare to be the one, last voice you hear on this campus as you're about to exit this significant chapter of your life when, after all, I'm an artist who never truly blossomed in art school. I would even go so far to say that I failed at it. In fact, after graduating from UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, and moving to New York City, I felt even more lost, inadequate, and intimidated. So in the absence of the will, motivation, confidence, and the creative agency that seemed necessary to participate in the art world, I chose to stop being an artist altogether. So for the next 11 years, I worked at a small not-for-profit organization called Storefront for Art and Architecture, devoting my time to support other artists and architects, organizing exhibitions, publications, panel discussions, conferences, all of which invited other people from other fields like writers, cultural critics, and philosophers. Those years became my true education. I was exposed to some of the greatest living artists and minds whose work mattered not merely because of their final products, but because of the rigor of their process and research, because the way they bridged aesthetic and design with social responsibility, and most importantly, because the way their forms were dictated by their ideas, not the other way around. It was then that I was convinced artists are not simply born with a talent, that ideas don't emerge from intuitions alone, but from lived experience, curiosity, research, and knowledge. So finally, in my early 30s, when I felt more mature, I slowly found my way back to making art. But this time, with a conviction, compelling concepts, and a visual language that felt entirely my own. Today, I'm known as one of the more nomadic and unconventional artists, with a practice that refuses to remain faithful to any single medium, style, or artistic language. I work simultaneously on photography, video installation, filmmaking, and now I'm directing operas. My story began in 1993 with still photography. Although I'd studied painting in school, I was a terrible painter. Then in 1998, I abandoned photography and turned to video art, and have since made several single and double channel video installations. And to my pride, my first video, Turbulent, received the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Biennial in 1999. But by 2002, I felt a certain exhaustion by the limitation of my own photography and video art, as well as working mainly within gallery and museum walls. So I took a break from the art world and moved towards cinema. I spent the next 6 years adapting a magic realist novel, Woman Without Men, into a movie, and to my surprise, in 2009, I received the Silver Lion Best Director Award at the Venice International Film Festival. The film was later released in cinemas, and since then, I have made 2 other feature films. I've directed 2 operas, as it was said, Aida, which was most recently staged in Paris Opera House in 2025, and Orfeo in Italy in 2026. So perhaps, my friends, this is precisely why I am standing here. Not because I'm unusually courageous or talented, because I have taken a lot of risk, because I have challenged traditional ideas about what defines being an artist, because I have crossed many artistic boundaries and languages to find my path, because I've experimented, often at the cost of abandoning my most commercially successful work, because I believe artists must continue to reinvent themselves, because I resent repetition and being identified by single style or medium. But my journey has not been an easy one. I've spent years studying and transitioning into new artistic languages. I've made good work, I've made bad work, I have failed, I have been celebrated, I've been critically destroyed, I have been canceled, and perhaps most importantly, I have been blacklisted by my own country because of the content of my work, which is exactly why I live in exile today. So, as you can imagine, I don't take being an artist lightly. For me, art has never been about a profession or a career choice. Art has been life. Art has been a conviction. And while education offers knowledge, discipline, and intellectual rigor, all which are essential to an artist's evolution, I have always questioned whether education alone can make someone an artist. I have resisted the idea that the purpose of school is simply to help artists discover their signature style, polish their stone, as they say, then send them off back into the world to build successful careers. So, as you prepare to leave the comfort of this wonderful institution, your professors, your peers, your studios, the crits, I warn you that you are about to enter a world that is far less kind, patient, generous, and infinitely more competitive. The question is, how can you carry this great education into the next, more challenging chapter of your life? What has education truly meant to you? How has it changed you? What tools has it left you with? I hope and expect that the answer is many. But sometimes the real education begins only after you graduate and begin to struggle. When you're against the wall, when you experience uncertainty, economic hardship, isolation, and pain. Making art for me was born out of an urge to confront the deepest, most existential turmoil and vulnerabilities of my own, but also to create a framework through which I could question the political realities, including a revolution and religious fervor that had so directly defined the course of my life. So it's fair to say that my art, my subjects, developed out of a personal human necessity to understand the world I inhabited and to express everything that I could not possibly express in words. The filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky from Russia once said, "It's a mistake to talk about the artist looking for his subject. In fact, the subject grows within him like a fruit and begins to demand expression. It's like a childbirth. The artist has nothing to be proud of. He is the master of the situation. He's not the master of the situation, but a servant." So the question is, how can artists today remain genuine in a culture increasingly driven by pressure, speed, conformity, competition, branding, and marketability? How do we resist selling our souls, becoming products? How can we avoid being intimidated by the exclusivity of a culture that often rewards conformity while pretending to celebrate originality? Where too often only a handful of artists and filmmakers dominate the institutions and markets, while countless others are dismissed because of their politics, race, age, background, character, or simply their refusal to fit neatly into categories. I would say, my friends, walk into the world with confidence and courage. Dream big. Be a pioneer. We are living through one of the darkest, most dangerous moments of our history, where war, political violence, genocide, authoritarianism, environmental catastrophe, mass displacement, famine, and political division have become the new normal. And naturally, as artists, we must ask ourselves, what is the role of art in such moments of global despair? Do artists really matter? Can art truly make an impact in time of political crisis? Whenever I face these questions, I immediately return to where I come from, Iran. Ever since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, when Iran's image in the world declined from that of an ancient culture of poets, philosophers, scientists, and mystics to a land of fanaticism, violence, and repression, artists became more central than ever. Despite censorship, the absence of freedom of expression, lack of institutional support, visual artists, filmmakers, writers, musicians, theater directors, poets, all people of imagination, rose to become the voice of their people, and in many ways, the moral conscience of their nations. Today, in Iran, culture is a form of resistance, protest, a threat to the very structure of an authoritarian regime. Iranian artists are deeply embedded in everyday life and continue to produce some of the most compelling, subversive, and electrifying work in the world. What is astonishing is how the average Iranian, like a taxi driver or a shopkeeper, knows their artist and has even seen auteur films made by famous filmmakers such as Abbasi Kiarostami, Asghar Farhadi, Jafar Panahi, because their films embody their emotional, psychological, and political struggles with clarity, yet with artistic complexity. At the same time, many Iranian artists have been targets of harassment, imprisonment, and torture, while countless others like me have been forced into exile. Even renowned filmmakers like Panahi and Rasulov have been recently behind bars and are still prohibited from making films in their own country because of the subversive nature of their work and because they dare to tell the truth. Living and working under a constant state of fear has been a way of life for Iranian artists. And freedom has remained an abstract concept that has never really truly applied to us Iranians. Yet Iranian artists continue producing urgent works, not in pursuit of fame, success, or financial reward, but as act of rebellion. In many ways, today, culture in Iran functions as one of the most effective weapons against tyranny, a powerful means to inspire, provoke, and bring hope to the public. Now, why am I sharing all of this with you all living in New York? Because I cannot help but see unsettling parallels emerging between Iran and the United States. I remember how, as a child growing up in Iran, my image of America was that of Hollywood. Hollywood films became a window into American culture, a country that most Iranians fascinate, fantasize, and idealize as an embodiment of utopia, perfection, and most importantly, democracy. Sadly, today we're beginning to witness a shift. America is increasingly projecting itself as a bully on the global stage, engaging in unnecessary, unjust wars, like with my own country, while internally moving toward a more authoritarian relationship with its own citizens. We are seeing growing forms of surveillance, censorship, and ideological pressure used to shape and control public life and imaginations, including within academic institutions, as we witnessed on this very campus only recently. Fear is becoming a defining reality in American culture too. Fear of authority, fear of deportation, fear of losing freedom of expression, fear as women losing autonomy over one's body and reproductive rights, fear of being canceled, fear of losing your job, fear of being publicly ostracized. Now, as the next generation of artists in America, it's worth asking yourselves, what will become of you in such social climate? Will you dare to resist making art under surveillance? To make art that speaks to the ordinary Americans and not merely to the privileged? To make art that disturbs and is not merely marketable, comfortable, and safe? I say to you, do not allow the system or the market to define your worth. You don't owe anyone a fixed identity. Do not become obedient. Protect your imagination. Protect your freedom. Protect the part of you that, protect the part of yourself that still dares to feel deeply in a world increasingly designed to numb you. And as you leave this institution tonight, I hope you leave not only with ambition, but with a moral courage. The courage to defend those whose voices are under attack, including immigrants, minorities, women, dissidents, queer communities, and all those increasingly dehumanized by political systems. Ultimately, my friends, why does art matter? Because it reminds us of each other's humanity, because it interrupts indifference, because it resists simplification, because artists are willing to tell the truth and are not biased. I will leave you with one last quote by Picasso. Art is the lie that enables us to realize the truth. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Shirin, thank you so much for your words and your work and for the inspiration and the challenge that you've given us. Thank you. My name is Jack Lerner. This is my fifth and final commencement address as chair of the film program. I'm stepping down at the end of next month to become a workaday professor and producer. And I mention this because I've been reflecting on the state of the world outside Columbia and how it's changed for film graduates over the last 5 years. There are a number of reasons, some of which Shirin just mentioned, to be anxious, fearful, and pessimistic right now, and one would have to be dishonest or delusional not to take those factors seriously. Both the United States and the world at large are in various stages of turmoil and conflict. The rise of artificial intelligence is drastically changing the way we work and live, making some jobs obsolete. And the greater job market is challenging for MFA and MA graduates, some of whom are carrying significant amounts of debt. Put it all together, and it's easy to be discouraged and depressed about the future. But I have to say, I know, it gets better. It does, I promise. I am actually not discouraged and depressed, at least most of the time. And here's why. Let's start with the world. Not a lot of good news there, it is true. However, if you'll allow me to take a slightly mercenary point of view for a moment, the worse shape the world is in, the more we need stories, the more we need artists who tell stories. When times are tough, that's what we gravitate to. Stories that take us out of our own lives so that we can see them anew. Stories that allow us to empathize with others and see the common threads that bind us all. Stories that speak truth to power and challenge our assumptions. Stories that make us laugh and thrill and cry and think. As the remarkable films at Cuff this weekend proved, our film MFA graduates have extraordinary stories to tell and formidable skills with which to tell them. As the Zoom In conference proved in February, our film and media studies graduates know how to think deeply about stories and how to shine unexpected light upon them. As for AI, there's a lot of debate about whether this is the second industrial revolution or the biggest dot-com bubble yet. Personally, I don't think those two choices are mutually exclusive. However, I do lean toward the former. Every week provides fresh evidence that we are at the dawning of a new age, which will bring immeasurable change for both good and ill, absolutely comparable to electricity, air travel, or the internet. And I know that sounds frightening too. So why am I mostly not afraid of that? Well, it's because I have the enormous good fortune, as do many of the students in this room, of learning from Professor Lance Weiler. The work of the Digital Storytelling Lab, which Lance has directed at the Columbia School of the Arts over the last 13 years, provides daily proof that AI can be not just a scary force that puts people out of work, but also a powerful tool that creative people can use to achieve their creative goals. Mostly you're right, and I'll get to that. We've already seen what happens when tech bros with computers use AI to make creative work without human direction and input. The word is slop, and an entire generation has already developed a strong and justified aversion to it. What Lance's classes and workshops make a convincing case is that AI can also be an assistive technology rather than a generative technology. I truly believe, and I have to believe, that as consumers of stories, we still want stories about people told by people. But not just any people. That's where the human beings in this room have a distinct advantage in the days and years to come. If anyone is most likely to get a job in this economy, it's going to be you folks. Movies and TV shows are still being made, colleges and universities are still hiring professors, and the same market forces that create change create opportunities. And I don't mean to sound naive. Rather, I have the benefit of having witnessed the remarkable achievements of previous graduates of the film program, and I have the personal knowledge that you folks are just as brilliant as they were. To put things in perspective, I'll close by telling you about something that happens every year at Columbia. Creative producing students are required to do at least one internship before graduating, and most of those internships involve reading and evaluating screenplays. Inevitably, the students doing internships, some of them are right over there, come to my thesis advisement class in shock because they had no idea that a lot of screenplays, perhaps most screenplays, are just terrible. And these aren't amateur scripts. These are scripts by professional writers submitted by agents and managers and lawyers. The reason our advisees are shocked is because the standard is so much higher at Columbia. They're used to reading and watching accomplished, exciting, creative work because that's what people do in this institution. And that work is going to continue to stand out in the world just the way it has for so many Columbia film graduates doing extraordinary things in film, television, new media, and academia. I look forward to seeing your additions to that panoply of creative brilliance, and in fact, I cannot wait to see it. And now I would like to introduce the film program's shining star, our Director of Academic Administration, Hana Seifu, who will read the names of the 2026 MA graduates in Film and Media Studies, followed by the MFA graduates in film.
Love you too.
We're going to start off with our Film and Media Studies graduates. Juliana Drew Bjorkson. Guan Jia Chu. Peyton Freeney. Philip Kogan Gilstrap. Hauza Guan. Renju Gua. Arya Habibinya. Yi Hong Lee. Jiaoze Li. Sydney Lim. Yozia Lin. Charles Mayers. Carly Pink. Rong Ha Shuao. Shao Yu Song. Ava Wintonsky. Zheng Taoyang. Ying Shu Zhou. Now we will continue with the MFA film students. Alexander Abate. Appa Agbayani. Catherine Burns. Natalie Cahill. Mitchell Kamada. Longjie Chen. Deborah Devin Chuang. Cameron Darnell Clay. Amy Davis. Kate DiRienzi. Anna Dunn. Jinwen Fan. Savannah Simone Gilsison. Martin Granada. Pierre Ho Young. Miaoning Hua. Sharif Ibrahim. Chelsea Jacobson. Ha Seong Kim. Rick Wei Kong. Priyanka Krishnan. Claire Lanham. Meng Yuang Li. Shoya Young Lee. Julie Lee Bard. Quetzali Paz Lopez. Jenda Marama. Ash Matthews Warren. Natalie McTighe. Mun Tiang Ko Hu. Annie Ning. Shuan Pen. Pooja Pandey. Menga Chen. Ridley Randolph. Fernando Garcia Renaldos. Ren Guan. Leon Ristov. Andrew Ryder. Zoe Salicrup Junco. Faiza Shaman. Yijan Shan. Isabella Stargarder. Caitlin Stevens. Miruna Strout. Michael Tay. Paul Taylor. Sophia Pauline Voss. Holly Wagner. Yinsha Wang. Eusebusz Wąsowicz. Patrick Way. C.C. Wheeler. Asia White. Joseph Chen Shi. Raina Li Wen Young. Alexander Yu. Shuqi Yuan. Zhang Yuan. Cecilia Wucheng Zhang. Yue Zhang. Teng Huangzhou.
I'm always amazed that the DAAs can pronounce all these names. It's unbelievable. That's incredible. I'm Brian Kulick. I'm the chair of the theater program. It's the way my grandfather would say it. You're in the theater. And I just want to add my voice to the chorus of congratulations to this extraordinary class of 2026, to your parents, to your relatives, to your loved ones. Big congratulations. And I have a couple things to say. So I've been thinking a lot about time, about how fast it's moving these days. It seems like you all just got here, and now with that proverbial blink of an eye, you're leaving. How did this happen? How could 3 whole years fly by that fast? I know there's probably some people going, these were 3 of the longest years of my life. But for me, it was fast. This may be a product of my not-so-gentle slide into decrepitude. My grandfather warned me when I was a little boy, watch out, Bry, he used to say. You get to a certain age and it starts whizzing by. And there is indeed a mounting pile of scientific data to support my grandfather's supposition. But even my son, who is a mere 27 years old, feels time's winged chariot picking up speed, turning his years, months, weeks, and even days into a kind of blur. There's another pile of scientific data to support my son's sensation. This particular data has to do with certain contemporary dynamics that have names like information overload, hyperflow states, and constant connectivity. The bottom line, our experience of a year is radically different from someone from the middle of the last century. When I was growing up, people used to say quaint things like, I'm bored. Now there seems to be no time to be bored. The phrase, I'm bored, has been replaced with, I'm tired. Welcome to the 21st century. According to a whole host of philosophers, this new and unrelenting relationship to time's quickening is not only impacting on our bodies, but also our souls. This, by the way, is the part of my speech that's going to sound like a tangent, but I promise to bring it back, this anecdote back home to the moment we're in right now. I promise. So, to prove that time has an ethical horizon, a group of ingenious sociologists developed the following rather devious experiment. They got one group of test subjects and tasked them with depositing a check at a nearby bank, telling them to take a very particular route. Along this route, they placed an actor who laid on the sidewalk groaning in pain. They found that every single test subject stopped and attempted to help the groaning bystander. Good actor. Then, with a second group of test subjects, they gave the same prompt with one slight variation. The bank for which the check has to be deposited was going to close in 10 minutes, and it was imperative for them to get to it, to get there before it was too late. The second group was given the same route, where the same actor was laying on the sidewalk groaning in pain. Guess what happened? Not one test subject on the second group stopped to help the groaning man. In fact, most didn't even notice there was a man groaning. There simply was no time to notice. I believe we as a nation are all trapped in the world of this second prompt, a world where there is no time to take note. This is an issue since, as Iris Murdoch reminds us, paying attention is a moral act. This brings me back to you, fine graduates, because one of the things that unites all of you, whether you're a filmmaker, a visual or sound artist, a writer, or a theater practitioner, you all are professional noticers. That's how you go about making your art. And in doing so, that's how you return the world to us. It's you, more than anyone else, who can slow us down, make us pay attention, and give us back the gift of sight that our age of information overflow, hyperflow states, and constant connectivity deprive us of, reconnecting us to ourselves, to others, and to our miraculous and unfortunately imperiled world that we need to sustain us. But it's more than just retrieving the world, which we are in continual peril of losing. It's also about your innate ability to expand that world with your art, to envision new and better worlds. This is part of philosopher Ernst Bloch, what he called the great not yet. And it lives inside each of you. It's the birthplace of the future, a domain which is unique, the unique province of the young. We turn to you to catch sight of its far-flung coastline, a potential reality so different from our current fallen world. So, in conclusion, when I graduated 42 some years ago, our class motto was, we can, we will, when we want to. If I could repurpose this motto for the class of 2026, I'd have it go something like this. You can, you will, because we need you to. Now more so than ever. So what are you waiting for? Get out there! Keep taking notes. Recover the world that we no longer see. Show us that world as it is, as it could be, and as it must be. And in the process, give us back the greatest gift of the human condition, our capacity to care. Time, as they say, is wasting. Thank you. So now John Haas, who's our DAA, is going to try to rival Hannah in pronouncing everyone's name correctly. Here we go.
Zena Albaoui. Selma Sierra Barada. Juan Pablo Cáceres. Brittany Camacho. Jessie Cao Long. Raven Rochelle Collier. Sarah Daniel. Melissa DeArabian. Ayla Marie Decaire. Rihanna D'Amelio. Sydney Irwin. Olulola Fadiran. Talia Marielle Feldberg. Shannon Anne-Marie Miller-Fish. Samantha Grocock. Josie Grace Gullickson. Mirza Hassan. Zachary Thomas Hedner. Edison Hong. Abigail Jones. Bryce David King. Kira Jung. Ronit Kathuria. Pauline Lara. Timothy William Lucy. Tatum Ludlam. Dennis Oliveira. Sophia Halima Parker. Jeff Parkinson. Anita Parrott. Flavie Philippon. Brandon Pineda Ayuda. Nicholas Rossi. Connor Scully. Zoe Stanton Savitz. Delia Dumont. Se retient. Peyton Tarowski. Matthew Valunas. Brittany Viking. Ruby Sanyu Wong. Emily Wasenda. And Sarah Ziegler. Congratulations, theater graduates.
Yeah. So congratulations to all of you who have worked so hard to find yourself here today. And at this point in your life, for short memories, I'm Mia Masaoka, Chair of the Visual Arts Department and Director of Sound Art. And I want to welcome all of you graduates to this new identity of artists with MFAs. And relatedly, one of my favorite writers from high school, Simone de Beauvoir, said, "On ne pas femme, on ne devient," in other words, one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. And that, I think there was this shaping or sculpting of a constructing of what it means or signifies to have a new identity and become something to transition to becoming a new version of yourself, which you are today. And this new version, similarly, one is not born an artist, but one becomes an artist. It's a process, and it's not a linear one, but it forms with fits and starts, seemingly looping backwards, and more like squiggles on a page rather than a linear graph. And like evolving identity, it's subject to change, to evolve, to backslide, and to pivot. It is especially true for artists as yourselves and sound artists. As in sound, the culture is dominated by visuality, and there's a necessary process of unlearning. For example, to bring sound as a primary concern is resisting the cultural prejudice that dominates of the dominance of the ocular or the vision. Yet for artists to see and feel from another perspective, that of sound, is a kind of full-bodied point of view, full-bodied discipline, and a full-bodied experience. And what it points to is that our perception of the world is not neutral, but rather through lenses that we can choose or choose to ignore. Even the term lenses has an ocular reference, and we see through language how deeply ingrained are our prejudices. But now, let me raise a proverbial glass and say, let our identities continue to evolve as living beings on this earth. And for those who know my work, I must speak for the trees and plants and the identity that is fluid and moving towards an alignment where trees and plants are beings, perhaps similar, if not superior, to that of the humans. And as we unlearn and learn, and as we become a new version of ourselves and of yourselves, we gain new fluid identities, and we continue to remind ourselves of our luminous alum, Joan Jonas. The most important thing that you can be doing is to keep doing your work, to keep doing your art. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the Visual Arts Programs Director of Academic Administration, Laura Mascara, who will read the names of the 226 MFA graduate in Sound and Visual Art. Woo!
Now, the challenge for our students are to match theater's energy. See, you can't even stop. If you could get more in touch with your feelings, please. Yes? Timothy Bear. Yeji Cho. Yukyung Cho. Cloris Dong. Miguel Gallego. Harold Garcia Vasquez. Alec Green. Sarah Hufford. Michael Igwe. Congrats, honey. Eugene Jiang. Sumin Kang. I know your name. Akira Kawahata. Ishao Lin. Aurel Lizette. Ashley McLean. Christine Miller. Ausa Unne Olafsdotter. Darylina Powderface. Francisco Ramirez Barrera. Jeannie Ryu. Rafael Rodríguez García. Maximiliano Rosiles Reyes. Yewan Song. Iris Wu. Felicitaciones, hombre. Alejandro Valencia.
Congrats, Jenny.
Jenny Williams. Congrats to the really talented and beautiful humans from Sound Art and Visual Arts Class of 26.
Good evening. Good evening and congratulations to my fellow artists and to the communities of family and friends who helped you arrive at this impressive achievement. I'm Deborah Paredes. I'm the chair of the writing program. And really, though, at least on my better days, what I mostly am is a poet. Which means, as my fellow poets will know, I'm inclined to dwell on a word and in all of its dark corners. Lately, it is the word human, and, well, not just the word, but the whole species, really, but that's the word that's been plaguing me. I can't help but recall the poet Lucille Clifton's question: who is the human in this place? In her poem, Jasper, Texas, 1998, which documents a scene of horrifying racial violence. Who is the human in this place? The perpetrator or the victim? Clifton asks. Who is the human in this place? How do we hold or liberate the human in this place? How to render the vulnerabilities and implicate the hubris of humanity? These are the questions that you, the students and very soon to be graduates of the Columbia Writing Program, have courageously asked and answered in your regular writing practice during your time here. In a historical moment marked by the relentless degradation of human life, you have chosen daily to undertake marvelous, miraculous acts of creation, which is to say, you have chosen to sustain and to mend and to remake our humanity. Under the ominous shadows of oligarchic looting, MAGA-fueled violence, unregulated AI, and ICE deployments and other acronymic threats, you have insisted on practicing the utterly human and humanizing work of creating art. You have, in our program, written inspiring poems, short stories, memoirs, profiles, novels, and other genre-defying works. And above all, you have developed a practice that is dedicated to both exposing and protecting, to ensuring our shredded and shared humanity. To paraphrase one of my favorite philosophers, the NBA Hall of Fame All-Star player, Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice. You'll know, it's one of his most famous lines. We're talking about practice. Because how else do we become better humans but by practicing? You carry with you the sacred practice you honed here, the daily act that gives me faith in any future for us humans. I'm here to tell you to keep at it. I'm talking about practice. I'm here to tell you that the happiest you'll ever be in relation to your writing is not when you land a book contract, which I'm sure you will, or secure an agent, or cash that first advance check, or when you hold soon your hard-earned diploma. No. The happiest you will be is in the practice you've been doing all this time. In those moments when you're in the flow of your writing, when you're jotting down a new idea or revising an old one, when you're at your desk and you're practicing with words until insight or illumination dawns and you feel a little closer to the human you've been striving to become. I'm here to tell you that this is the one thing about your writing that capitalism can't give or take from you, that authoritarian regimes cannot seize, that AI cannot steal. But you likely already know this because you've been practicing. It's how you got to this moment and how you will move so courageously beyond it. So keep at it. May your writing practice continue to draw us closer to our own and to one another's most tender and enduring humanity. Thank you. And it's now my deep pleasure to introduce the Writing Program's Director of Academic Administration, Frank Winslow, who will read the names of the 2026 MFA graduates in writing.
Thank you to all the friends and family who are here with us. We love seeing you celebrate along with our graduating students. Michael Acherino. Pallavi Ahuja. Britt Astrid Alfson. Diana Athena. Naila Jonquil Ayadeji. Grace Biddle. Gigi Blanchard. Randall Browning. Margaret Carter. Mei Wen Chen. Renee Chestnut. George Cole. Katie Conover. Jordan Croge. Kyra Ann Dawkins. Lily Donat. Anna Eastman. Nora Elgarzar. Jillian Gallardo. Haley Garvin. Raquel Goddard. Varid Gupta. Stephanie Gutierrez Rios.
How are you?
Yeah, you look fabulous. Nevin Nahar Hawk. Maria Isabella Hernandez.
Hey, Patricia.
Patricio Hernandez Palacios. Zhu Xian Huang. Congratulations. Bems James. Valentina Hadamijo. Sophie Kautenberger. Eleni Kokinos. Asha Lemmy. Yifan Liu. Ellis Leaders. Tyler Maher. Congratulations. We love Tyler too. Lauren Edith McCarthy. I've been practicing. How are you? All right. Jagyon Balkwa Misra. Megan Mullen. Ioana Nicola. Ananya Pandya. Micah Pava. Bailina Poo. Madison Robinson. Jane Rose. Arisha Sampson. Andrew Scott. Rachel Severino. Congratulations. Miriam Sayed. Mamuna Saida. Wendy Lisha Tafor Novillo. Francis Thomas. Sarah Weck. Okay. Hannah Wiederquist Keller. Congratulations. Reginald Williams. Sarah Louise Wingirter. Congratulations, Killian. Killian Wright Jackson. Congratulations again to the class of 2026.
All right, thank you to everyone. Graduates, please rise. This is it. You've done it. So let's make it official. Having completed the requirements for the Master of Fine Arts or Master of Arts, I now confer on you these degrees with all the rights and privileges thereto attached. Congratulations. Now we have a party. So as the graduates are going to move out, let the graduates proceed out first, and everybody else, please follow in your own time. Just a quick thing to say, the whole of the area in Lerner Hall is where we have our party. Anyone can be anywhere, but if you're trying to find people, we've sort of suggested that film and theater would be up on 5, and writing and visual arts on 4, and the drinking all begins on 3, and eating too, and anything you want to do on the way up. But everyone is welcome everywhere, so enjoy the celebration.
you.